This is my context portion. Virtually the entire Gospel of John is found in its first chapter. It seems that the events that follow hearken back time after time to something written, said, or done in the first chapter. The purpose statement of the book in 2031 records that the signs were written, quote, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, unquote. This process begins in John's Gospel in the prologue. Everything changes when the honest seeker makes the connection between John 1:1 and John 14. Indeed, as our professor has said, one's theology is based basically on how one interprets John 1:1 and John 1:14. This portion is followed by the testimony or witness of John the Baptist. The I am statements of Jesus, which echo back to Moses' day, are contrasted with John the Baptist declaring, I am not. The tension starts between the Jewish leaders and John the Baptist as the chief priests interrogate him. This will eventually lead to the tension between the Messiah and the Jews. John takes them back to take them forward. He takes them back to the Old Testament, to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah 40 and verse 3 prophesies about this voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. John the Baptist also introduces baptism in these first verses of John's Gospel, and obviously it is connected with Nicodemus' visit in John 3. The pericope I've chosen to do, which is John 1:14 through 27, has some very obvious transitions. As I begin with the incarnation, we're bringing things from the cosmic context contained in the first verses of the book to a more earthly sphere. The Word becomes flesh. The passage moves from the preceding verses, which contain more of a view from a heavenly perspective, to what actually transpired at the beginning of Jesus' ministry on earth. These are placed in the context of the witness of John the Baptist. I see the book providing the narrative, which I try to bring out in my performance. The narrator is explaining to his audience the interaction of the characters. I purposely try to delineate who is talking to whom and choose a different pose and point my gaze in a different direction to achieve a difference in the characters' conversation. I also endeavor to cast John as unimpressed with the visitors from Jerusalem. As far as mnemonics, mine stem from the places covered by the story. The spatial imagery to me moves in the following order. First, the incarnation in verse 14. Second, the wilderness witness, verses 15 through 18. And thirdly, the priest's inquiry, verses 19 through 27. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him, cried out, saying, this is he of whom I said, he who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. Of his fullness we have all received, and grace from grace. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time, the only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father. He has declared him. Now, this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who are you? He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, I am not the Christ. They asked him, what then? Are you Elijah? He answered, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he said, no. Then they asked him, who are you, that we may give an answer to those who sent us? What do you say about yourself?" John said to them, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now, those who were sent were from the Pharisees. They asked him, saying, "Why then do you baptize, if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John said to them, "I baptize in water, but there stands one among you whom you do not know. It is he who, coming after me, is preferred before me, whose sandal strap I'm not worthy to loosen." This is my reflective exercise. First question: in what way did this assignment and the assignments leading up to it utilize the further development of a oneness Pentecostal hermeneutic? Verse 14 in my assignment is a crucial point in any oneness Pentecostal hermeneutic. As Brother Seagrave said, and I'm not quoting him exactly, how God became flesh is what separates the Christology of individuals and faiths. We believe God did not cease to become God when he became man. He was fully God and fully man. So all of our oneness Pentecostal hermeneutic hinges on John 1:14 and how we allow other scriptures to interpret it. Second question was, how does this passage celebrate the God who is described as uniquely one in the Old Testament and who became permanently incarnate in Jesus? From verse 14, where God becomes flesh, this passage gives the play-by-play account of exactly what it looked like when our one God took on the form of a servant. It is as if it's a page out of God's journal, if you please. And this is the time when the culmination of all the Old Testament prophecies concerning a coming Messiah became reality. Third question: how do you understand the working of the Spirit in the biblical text as normative for today? If you mean the pneumatology of the passage, the Spirit took on flesh in chapter 1, verse 14. Also, the Spirit moved through time to bring about the witness of the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Fourthly, given your text's connections with the Old Testament, how does this passage privilege the beliefs and practices of the New Testament? Well, it was a turning point. Jesus has come in this passage. That changes everything. The forerunner has arrived and testified that things have changed. There is one among you, he says, that they do not know. He later identifies Jesus in verse 29 as the Lamb. The text privileges the beliefs and practices of the New Testament believers in that it identifies who they should follow. Not Elijah, not the prophet, but Jesus, the unknown Messiah hidden among them.